It's interesting how you want to be remembered.
So I asked the question about what I hope the legacy is.
When thinking about your legacy, what are people going to remember about you, about your operation?
It's been an honor to be part of the Simmental family. And like any family, there is a legacy. And to me, the legacy is so important to continue on.
I hope the legacy for the next generation have the passion for our breed that we have spent a lifetime building.
Welcome to my world in the three-star Simmental. My name is Glenn Osborn. I was born in the early 40s. I've worked at Bar 5 Simmental, and Simmental have been a big part of our lives. Got my first Simmentals in 1973 at a Bar 5 sale. I started working there in 72, and I bought 3 half-blood heifers. I was born in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, in the hospital on the hill, and it was November, and my mother said it was so damn cold she'd never ever have another kid in the hospital. My grandpa's farm was just 2 miles west of Weyburn, so that's where we went to live that winter. Grandpa was still living on the farm, and he wasn't about to leave. So in 42, I guess, my dad bought a quarter section for $800. That was about all he could have. He couldn't even afford that, but he bought it anyway. We had a nondescript commercial cattle herd, and he had Belgian horses was his main thing, and he had a lot of hogs, something to do with the war years, and you had to, if you were a farmer, you had to produce some hogs. And my mother had chickens. We had no running water, no electricity, and that was my initiation to farm life. And we were there for 5-6 years, and we had 3 really terrible winters in a row. And my mother said I was going to get an education, and we moved to the city of Weyburn. Bought a house there, and I was there all through my school years and my sister. When I graduated from grade 12, well, now I'm a city kid, and I wasn't very happy about it, I guess. And when I got out of grade 12, it was the second happiest day of my life. Because we had moved to town, so my weekends and everything else was pretty much taken out, going out to the farm to work there, because I didn't really care for the city, I guess. And so I had 4-H calves and everything else, but most people thought I lived on a farm. We showed the horses a lot. Every summer we'd be gone from 1st of July till first week of August with the horses, showing them. My dad had a 6-horse hitch and some breeding stock, and he kept all that when I left to go to Bar 5 in 72. I guess the reason I ended up at Bar 5 probably started at the first agribition, and I had showed cattle there of my own, and I was at the rodeo one night with a guy by the name of Jack Hockley. He was a PFRA buyer for bull buyer, but we were sitting in the old arena, and the cement steps going upstairs, and these 4 girls come running up the steps, and one of them just tripped right at this top and fell in my lap, literally. And turned out that was Vera. So anyway, we dated through that winter, and July we were married at 72. And so now, what am I going to do for a livelihood? So I talked to my dad about him moving off, and I would take over and buy him out, and of course it was like his dad, he wasn't going to move off. So now here I am, married and got no job. What am I going to do? Mac Draper, out of the blue, phones me, and I knew Drapers because I'd helped them at Shorthorn sales. They knew Ross Thomas, and I knew Gordon Brothers. I did not know the two Mitchells, and I knew Wilf Davis not very well, but because he had showed cattle when we were showing horses, you knew everybody. So I kind of knew him too. Anyway, Mac wanted to know if I'd be interested in a job. Well, what was it? Well, he said these guys had got together and they'd formed Bar 5 Semitol, and they were looking for somebody to present and show cattle and get ready for sales. So I thought, well, this is kind of up my alley. I kind of like that part. He says, well, you send in a resume to such and such an address. And I said, what's a resume? And I said, well, I know all you guys. I said, you know what I've done and what I'm doing. I said, if I get the job, I said, give me a phone call. And I'd never thought much more of it, except that sure would like maybe have that job. Don Mitchell phones me and tells me that if I wanted this job, that I could have it. And he said, I told him I would. And he said, well, I'm going to get back to you right away. So a few days later, he phoned and he wanted Vera and I to come down and look at a trailer because they were going to pull a trailer in for us to live in. The trailer wasn't that bad. It was 10 by 48 or something. But there was a really nice porch on it, a big porch. It had you could put a deep freezer and goats and everything, quite big. It made the whole place look big. So anyway, we said, yeah, that was fine. So in September, we moved to Bar 5. And the trailer was there and it was all ready. And we walked in and all it was a trailer. The porch wasn't there. What happened to the porch? Well, it was extra money. And Don Mitchell was the financier, it turns out, of the Bar 5 program. He was kind of tight with his money. And he decided that it was too much money to pay for that porch. So we lived in that trailer for 2 winters, I guess. Luckily, the 1974 sale came along. We can talk about that later. And we ended up getting a new house. So that's how I started, and that's where it come from.
Hi, I'm Vera Osborn, and part of Three Star Semitol. I was fortunate enough to be a member of the Regina Pony Riding and Driving Club. And through there, then in the summertime, we would be out at shows, and we'd be gone all summer. And at that time, those shows, the little fairs, they had all species. They had sheep, pigs, heavy horses, cattle, and through there, I guess I met Glenn. So I knew of Glenn, I should say. I didn't meet him at the time. And then I'd come back and, you head back to school. Went to a university in Regina and took teaching. And then my first year teaching, I was down in Redverse from 71 to 72. And then met Glenn at Agribition. And 72, we were married and moved to Manitoba, to Bar 5. First son, Garrett, was born in 74 and at Bar 5. And Dave, our second, was born in 77 there. And then 78, when we moved back, to the farm. And then Monica was born in 84. So in 78, when we moved back, we had, I think, about 20 head. And we went to, 20 head for fitting and showing and sale that we took to, I think, AgX, Lloydminster, Edmonton, back to Saskatoon, and Agribition. So we had a couple fellows working for us at the time, Dave Bennett and Lloyd Buchanan, I guess. And so thankfully we had Glenn's folks to rely on to look after the kids, and Glenn's dad would do chores. And then when they got kind of tired of that, my folks would come down. My dad didn't do chores, so we had the neighbor came over to do chores. But through that, we met lots of great people. So from 78 till, I suppose, about 90 or so, when we were still showing, like I went to all the Agribitions with Glenn and helped. I was usually the wash person. I'd rather be in the wash rack than doing other stuff. And except Glenn thought he should chain me to the stall because I kept wandering off to visit after my washing duties were done. but yeah, just we met lots of great people, and then in I guess about 84 or 85. Anyway, Glenn, we started taking Garrett along with us, and so he would be showing in the YCS or the junior show a little bit. All of the kids have shown at Agribition. They've shown it at various other shows. Dave loved going to the YCS show. He went up to, I think it was Melville and Saskatoon and various shows that they had. Just the responsibilities that you learn, whether taking care of an animal, handling people, let's say, or it's intergenerational. So they learn how to speak with people and meet people, and work with people, and then when we were still at the farm, since we've moved into town 2 years ago, but when we're at the farm, our one grandson has chickens over at our place. So you'd either see 1, 2, or 3 of the grandsons would come over every day for a little visit, and you talk about the egg business or the chicken business, whatever, or find out what they were doing in 4-H. The 3 boys all show cattle. They're all in YCS, but they're all in 4-H, showing heifers, steers, continuation, 3-year-olds, whatever is on the list that year. And our one granddaughter that lives down Big Beaver area, she's in high school rodeo, so she's involved with farm. And our other granddaughter, Layla, she's in horse 4-H, and I think she gets to show a sheep at Agribition this year. But she's learned, to have respect for livestock and how to work, that you have chores to do, you have duties to do. And that's, I think what the kids have learned is that there's responsibility, that hopefully that their animals come first and you're second.
How I got into Simmentals was through Bar 5, of course. But when we moved there in September, there was cattle coming and going, and the full-bloods were all coming to Douglas, and we had a little red barn to work out of, and another little red shack. I had 2 horses. Here come these big old full-blood cows, and my God, they were huge. By the time fall, when the weaning time come, we also had probably Bar 5 had 200 or 300 head of cattle down at Hartney, Manitoba. Percentage cattle, half-bloods and everything. And all these calves were coming up, and we were fitting them for sales and stuff. And man, they were the biggest calves I'd seen in wean. So they kind of were impressive that way. And then by next spring, and that year was when I bought those first 3 half-blood heifers, and they calved out with no trouble, but except that they were bull calves and not heifers. And that's where my first introduction to them was. I guess the big thing with the cattle with Bar 5 was the 1974 sale. And I don't know, we probably had 100 head of cattle in it. I don't really remember the numbers. But they were a pretty good bunch of cattle. And everybody kept saying this sale was going to be a big time deal. And come around to sale time, there was a pre-sale party, and we'd have Leroy Van Dyke, who's a country singer, for maybe a couple hundred people that showed up at the pre-sale party. The sale barn itself was the Ag X Pavilion, and it was a huge sale rink, and it'd be packed to the rafters when sale started. You couldn't have got one more. There's people standing outside, I'm sure. And sales started, and predictions on it were getting to be like 300,000, and then 400, and then 500,000, and then by that time everybody would think, well, that's not going to happen. Time it was over, it was $1.2 million. And nowadays that would have been $1974. That would probably have been $5 or $6 million. And you could still buy a tractor for $6,500. Just boomed. It was just, you couldn't even believe it, how fast things happened. That was in March or April was a sale. And by that fall of 74, I don't know how many sections of land they'd bought. There was, instead of the 3 or 4 of us that were there, the biggest thing that happened there was Neil Moffat showed up to work with me at the show barn, and you couldn't get a better guy than Neil. He was terrific. So Neil and I had a pretty good relationship, and sometimes I thought that I maybe sometimes didn't work well with other people, but with Neil I got along really well, and so that went on after Sale, until he moved to New Zealand. But things just happened so fast that you couldn't believe it was going. We had all this land. We put up 4 new houses for people to live in because they were hiring people. And next thing, we had to pivot on a whole section of land to put water on that we didn't have before. And it was kind of hard to keep up with it. It was pretty exciting for a while. I think you have to remember that there was no IVAMEC, and there wasn't a lot of things that people have now like, it's so easy to get cattle ready for a sale now. But then it was all hand brushing, it was washing, it was malathion for lice control. There wasn't things like we have now. In the winter times, before the sales, with all these bulls, they were run through the wash rack like 2 or 3 times, and some days it'd be 30 below. We'd blow them off. We did have blowers. We'd blow them off and then send them back out into the pens. And there was no roof pens. They were all just open pens. The shelter was the trees. And you'd walk out, and these bulls would look like walking ice blocks. They'd all ice up on top. And we'd wash them 2 or 3 times a winter, plus a halter breaking, trimming the feet. It was a lot of work, and we had to work with them a lot, because when we got them to the AgX barn or sale ring, these sale rings weren't maybe 5 feet high, and these bulls would all have to come in. Their pens outside or in the building were the same. They were all these 5-foot pens that were made to hold sheep. And we're supposed to keep these bulls in these pens. And I don't remember having much trouble. Well, Wilfred come along and start sorting. That would be a nightmare, because you'd have to get them. You didn't want 2 bulls with one big one, one large one, it'd be one small one. You'd have to get them all. And he liked sorting cattle. So anyway, they'd get them all sorted, put them in the pen, get them all in the pens, and we'd have 20 guys to do it, so it wasn't that bad in there. But when they went through the ring, they all went through. Well, sometimes there'd be 2 at a time, but mostly just 1 at a time. And they'd walk around the ring, and I don't think we ever had one jump out of that ring. But you'd have to see the ring in the pictures and see the ring men on the outside of it, and it didn't come up to their chest. So it was a lot of work. Putting these cattle in one afternoon, and this lady and a fellow with a Stetson hat, and they come along, and just when I was bringing them up, and I guess they could kind of see that I was bringing these heifers in, and they wanted to see the heifers. And I said, well, if you wouldn't mind, just go stand on this little hill. I said, when they come around the corner, I said, wave your arms at them, and they'll go into the shed there, because they'd been doing it. So anyway, the heifers come out, and sure enough, they waved their arms, and the heifers went in. And so they come down and looked at the heifers, and she was quite a nice lady, and talked to this fella. He was pretty interested in them. And so anyway, I didn't see them the next day because the sale was on. And you could run the cattle into the sale ring, but I was out at the back, so I could hear the microphone, and this heifer brings a pile of money, and she sells to Hudson Pine Farms. Hudson Pine, that's Mrs. Rockefeller. I thought, well, maybe get a picture with this one. So anyway, after the sale, she come around. We had to get her picture, as Wilf and I think John Draper and Don Homer was his name, was the manager. and Mrs. Rockefeller. So I have a picture of Mrs. Rockefeller. And then she came to a couple of our sales in the fall sales when we had some polled cattle to sell there at Bar 5. And we became pretty good friends. I go to Denver one year and I'm down in the yards and I hear from behind me, Glenn. Turn around, it was Mrs. Rockefeller and Don Homer. So we had a little chat and things were going good. I thought that was kind of neat. Getting on to the 3-star part, I'd bought my first 3 head with my partners, my brother-in-law and Bill Wysocki, guy from Winnipeg. And we put some money together and bought these 3 heifers. I think it was $1,600 a piece, so it was getting into the Simmental business pretty easy. There was a place at Weyburn coming up for sale. So we were working on that to buy it through Farm Credit Corporation. So I was getting closer to getting it anyway. So then we brought the cattle there from the ones that I bought from Bar 5. And by then we had about 10 head of cattle. We brought them. I bought 20 half-blood polled Hereford cows, or polled Simmental cows, half-bloods, from Lewis White, who just lived west of us. And they ended up being really good cows. Wilford was working for Transcon then, and he picked up half a dozen or 8 or 10 cows for me at different sales. And then C.J. O'Grady from O'Grady Ranches, he sent down a bunch of full-blood cows to me on just to board them. And then Wilf sent probably another 10 or 12 cows of his on boarding. So within a year or 2, we had 60 head of cows built up. And then we were still going to shows and fitting cattle for other people. 78, when I left in April, the World Congress show was that summer. And our first consigners, or the people that I took cattle for, were Jack Stillborn, Bernie Clarkson, Wayne Johnson, and Earl Ballard. Well, between those 4 or 5, 8, we had 8 or 10 head of cattle there. And we had the reserve grand champion bull. And the only one that beat us was Bar 5's bull, who I probably fitted him too. And then in the sales, we had this high-selling bull, the Clarkson bull, he sold to Shaw West. The red bull I had for Earl Ballard, he was the second high seller to Highwood, the Grunevelds. And then I met those folks, and between Johnsons and Grunevelds and that bunch that I had cattle for, what great people they were. We just had a great time with them over more years too. I ended up selling a lot of cattle for Wayne Johnson, and they were nice people. We got along really well. And that's how 3-star got going, and that's how he kept going. And Dave, our second son, he came home, bought 3/4 of his own land, and then eventually I sold the rest to him. So 3-star was still in operation, and he showed some, and now he has 3 boys, so there's another 3-stars. The beginning, the way it was 3-star was one of my first partners. There was my brother-in-law and Bill Wysocki, and he was a racehorse man from Winnipeg, and his farm was 3-star stables. And so when we got together, we said, well, we'll just call it 3-star Simmental. So there was 3 of us in on it, which made sense. And then after I'd bought them out, we had 3 kids. So there was another 3-stars. So it just kept rolling. It always ended up being 3 of something. I guess the reason after we got into the Simmentals and stayed in them, mostly financial. They the calves were, when you wean those calves in the fall, you got to check, and it was always, everybody says, well, yeah, but if you'd have raised smaller calves, you'd have got bigger pennies. Well, bigger pennies, you got to get weight and you got to get dollars. You don't want pennies, you want dollars. There was times when even at the auction markets, especially in Weyburn, were not, I wouldn't say they weren't sympathetic to the shorthorn business or to the Simmental business. Well, everybody said, well, there's when you take the hide off, they're all the same. Yes, but as a cow-calf producer, the hide is still on them, and you can say what you like, but the color makes a difference. So we tried to breed the cattle to get a solid color, and if you don't mind the spotted Simmentals, then get a bunch of them so that the color is still the same. I seen a pen of spotted red, white steers and heifers up at Ronnie Noble's one time, and I got a lesson there. When you sort them off to themselves, they look pretty damn good too, but you can't put them in with the red solid colored ones. It messes up both pens. So what's one thing that I kind of like to work on when I was breeding cattle? The thing is, you still got to breed them for functionality and feet, legs, udders, and everything else. You can't just look at color, so it makes it much, much harder. I think that's one of the things that I liked about the Simmental business, plus the people. I guess the livestock business in general, but the Simmental people that we met through the years were just the greatest people. I was on the Saskatchewan Simmental Association board for 6 years, 2 years as president, and I was also on the Agribition board for 4 years, and I was on the youth judging committee there for 4 years. But I never got on the Canadian board because I was, at the time, was in the late 80s, and I was having trouble with the finances of the Farm Credit Corporation, and I just couldn't afford to be going out with them. So I never did, and I regretted that for not trying to get on the Canadian board. In 1988, Alec Graff was committee chairman for the Canadian YCS. And he phoned me and he said, would I be interested in helping? Because the Saskatchewan Simmental Association was hosting the Canadian meetings. And he said that the Canadian YCS was having trouble getting going. So anyway, because I was on the Agribition board, I ran into a guy by the name of Roy Phillips, and he was the field man for Western Canada for Cooper's Agri Farm. Well, wouldn't you know it, they were looking to sponsor a Canadian junior cattle show or cattle thing. He said Angus and the Herefords both had sponsors and they were wanting to sponsor some. I said, have I got a deal for you? The Saskatchewan YCS kids that year had done a hell of a job, but I was just proud to had a part in that to get it going. We can talk about the trip I made to France. Doug Baird from Ottawa Valley Group, he had phoned me and they had a permit for one bull, but nobody wanted to go over for one bull. And would I be interested in going? And of course, so I took on the job. And then as soon as I got that, Stoughton Brothers at Maidstone, they phoned me and they had 2 imports, all 3 for bulls. And so I said, yeah, I could probably pick up some. So anyway, I took it on, and I'm sitting in the airport in Toronto waiting for the plane to take off, 747. And 20 minutes before we load, comes an announcer say, we would suggest that anybody on flight such and such going to Heathrow Airport do not get on the plane. Yikes. The reason being that there's a possibility of a 24-hour strike in Heathrow Airport. So the plane is leaving, but we don't know where it's going to land. So I'm thinking, what the hell? How, if they do and I don't get to Heathrow, I'm going to be late getting to Paris, and then I'm going to be late getting to the next flights. Well, if I don't go, I'm never going to get there. So like a dummy, I got on the plane. And sure enough, Heathrow is closed. We end up in Prestwick, Scotland. Air Canada had a bus there for us, and they took us to a train station, and we ended the night in London. Got a hotel. But then the next morning, the flight from Paris that I had, it was gone the day before. So they rerouted me to the next day, so I lost 2 days. Now we're in Paris, and the flight to Lyon, France, it's gone. So I got a taxi to the railway station, don't speak French, and found a guy that could kind of speak some English, bought a ticket, and told me what train to get on, and there's got to be 25 or 30 trains to go. I have to find the right place. The train pulls out, and the conductor comes back through, takes a ticket, and I asked him if it was going to Lyon, France. He said yes. By this time, I'd had a lot of coins in my pocket. I didn't know how much they were worth, and I called Albert Mazier. He was going to be the guy that toured me around. Now, this is probably 10 or 11 at night. He hadn't heard from me for 2 days now. So I lost those 2 days or 3 days pretty near. And I plugged all this money into this pay phone. I didn't know how much it was. I just kept plugging it. Dialed the number, and he answered the phone. This is Albert Mazier. This is Glenn Osborn. He said, where the hell have you been? So anyway, he come and picked me up and got to my hotel there for the night. He picked me up in the morning, and I think he drives like that all the time, but it was the fastest driving I've ever seen in my life. No wonder there's so many sports car drivers out of France. But anyway, we got 2 bulls for Stoutons and 1 for Ottawa Valley. The best bull I thought was maybe from Ottawa Valley, but they hardly used him. I don't know why. They never give me any reason for not using him. The Prince, the 2 that Stoughton got was Prince and Poncho. Opera was a bull that Ottawa Valley got. Some of the stories that should be told, and we got one about Marlon Blanc, myself, Wes Mack, and LaFrance, Vernon. We decided somehow or another that we should go to Denver and take a look at these black cattle, see if we could make something go from there. So we had a pretty good trip, and we all come back with a kind of disappointed, I think, in the black cattle we seen. There was AI bulls that they only had 2 of them there. I don't remember their names, but they were a pair of puds that you wouldn't read anything to. And as it turns out, all 4 of us ended up with black cattle. When those first black calves come, they were super, and they were just changed our whole attitude about this, where the Simmental business might be going. But we also took a lot of flack from it, because there was a change coming, and there was a lot of Simmental guys that thought they shouldn't be even registered in the Simmental registry book. So they were wanting to make their own. If they were going to be black, they should make their own book. But as things go around, the director's seen what was going on, and it's all turned out for the best, I think. So we had a pretty good trip, and we all ended up with the black cattle. For my legacy, I would hope that I haven't stepped on too many people's feet. I hope that I made a mark as a showman and fitter. I hope people that I've sold cattle to, I hope that they've done well with them, and I hope I've done a good job of breeding cattle into the next generations that'll still be around in a while. I'm glad that I sat on the boards that I did through the years. I think I brought something to those boards at Agribition and the Saskatchewan. And I guess you just be remembered for being a good person. I guess that's about all you can hope for. I guess the other thing in your legacy is I hope that I left something to my children and grandchildren that they'll be able to continue, and I hope they have the same kind of lifestyle and got as lucky as I did through the years that we come through. And that's about all a person can do in his lifetime. Thank you.
So through the years, all the friends that we've made and acquaintances, places that we were able to travel, that Glenn especially was able to travel, the things that we got to do, you know, you wouldn't trade it or say, no, I didn't want to do that at all. No, it's just been a slice of simmental pie, and it's just been marvelous. Thank you.